My next guest is Coach Carlos Johnson. Mr. Johnson, aka Coach Carlos, is a professional speaker, trainer, author, and educator. Coach Carlos and his team of consultants have utilized his experience and research in school culture to successfully turn around 3 failing public schools and 1 private Christian academy. His training and strategies help to change school culture, increase parental engagement, student enrollment, and student retention. In addition to working with district leaders and instructional teams, Mr. Johnson's online parent training, powerengage.net, trains hundreds of parents and instructional teams each year on the psychology and practice of student-teacher engagement. In response to the national school-to-prison pipeline crisis for young men, in 2015, Mr. Johnson stepped into the principalship position to lead the Male Leadership Academy. Utilizing his research and experience in stakeholder engagement, he doubled school enrollment, transformed school culture, and increased student performance school-wide in just 3 short years. Welcome to the podcast, Carlos.
Wow, thank you for having me. I feel good coming out of the trenches.
Yes, yes. Well, I always ask people at the beginning of the podcast about a story when you came out of the trenches. So you told me you had several.
Yeah, I guess probably the famous one, or I shouldn't say the famous one, but the one that's near and dear is the one you kind of mentioned in my bio, and that was taking over the Academy for All Boys.
Yeah.
And really helping that school come out of the trenches. And I didn't do it alone, of course. We had a great team of instructors who were committed to working with young men who were in some ways were cast aside at other schools.
Mm-hmm.
And in other ways, there were parents who just wanted a different learning environment for their sons. And then we were struggling with enrollment, and so having to come out of the trenches meant I had to retrain an entire staff on brain-based learning,
Mm-hmm.
because we weren't teaching boys and girls, we were teaching uniquely boys exclusively. So I didn't have a staff who understood the male brain or knew the science behind the male brain.
Mm-hmm.
So teaching them that, and then helping young men understand that they were not throwaways. This was not a punishment going to an all boy academy. Um, Helping parents understand that their boys could learn and learn at a high level.
Mm-hmm.
Um, that was a tough task, but by the end of 3 years, our boys were a year and a half. Were reading at a year and a half past their grade level. We had our expulsions were almost zero, with our suspensions down drastically, and we dropped retention. We increased retention with our instructional team. Teachers were rotating in and out, but we almost eliminated that. I had a very dedicated team. And then, of course, the consequences of that is our enrollment
Mm-hmm.
went sky high. So we came out of the trenches in a good way.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so that was over a three-year period from 2015 to 2018.
Yes. Mhm.
So you speak a lot on this now. I wanted to break down some of your just areas of expertise when you talk about helping schools, right? So we'd have 2 separate things in terms of increasing student enrollment or retaining teachers and retaining students. The
Yeah.
first thing is stakeholder engagement.
Yeah.
So we don't always think about that. We think about communication with stakeholders, but
Right.
engaging them is a large piece.
Yes. 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 Yeah. Yeah. Getting stakeholders involved is what our industry is we're better at that. We still could, use some work there, but getting them involved is one thing. Getting them engaged is the next level.
Sure.
Involved is just, can you do this for us? Can you do that for us? Engaged is when they have bought into the vision.
Sure.
They have bought into the mission, and they have rolled up their sleeves and said, okay, let's work together. And when you get stakeholders, i.e., your instructional team, your students, your parents, your community, when you get them bought in and engaged, oh man, I've seen it firsthand what can happen when involvement transforms into engagement.
Mhm, mhm. And in your experience at the academy, did it take a year or two to really get engagement from the stakeholders?
No, what I was taught by my mentor and what I learned firsthand is that true culture transformation takes at least 2 years,
Mhm,
at
mhm.
least. So the first year was assessment, evaluation, and then implementing new systems, keeping the great ones that work, but implementing new systems, not just throwing in new systems because they were my pet projects,
Sure.
but really evaluating the current systems and then saying, hey, these work, let's keep them,
Yeah.
or maybe tweak them, but then supplementing them with better systems. So that happened the first year. The second year was the buy-in.
Mhm,
That's when the buy-in and the engagement kicked in.
mhm.
The third year, now you're harvesting from, you're harvesting from the seeds and the seeds that you planted and watered.
Mhm.
But then with growth comes additional problems.
Sure.
The one thing that when I'm working with districts, I'm sharing with leadership is that education is always problem solution, problem solution, problem solution.
Sure.
For every problem, there's a solution. As soon as you solve something, that creates another problem.
Mhm,
And
mhm.
as soon as you solve that, that creates another problem.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so you're always in that cycle of problem solution, problem solution. So after we had our 2 years of transforming culture, our third year was a boom, and that created a whole host of problems.
Mhm,
Good
mhm.
problems, and we were prepared to handle them, but still problems yet.
Sure, sure, sure. Yeah, no, having that foundation, like you said, with seeing if the current systems are functioning or reevaluating, reforming those systems and then getting the buy-in and harvesting, right? It's kind of like you said, that cycle. When you have
Yeah,
those things in place, then you're prepared for the next set of
that's right.
problems.
That's right. That's right. That's right.
And then the next piece of, the teacher and student retention is really finding out how we can retain our students,
Yeah.
right, in schools. You were working in the school before COVID, and now afterwards, attendance is becoming even a greater challenge.
Yeah.
But you're working with schools now. So, what do you see as a piece to helping students stay in the school, if it's their neighborhood school or if it's a choice enrollment, and
Yeah.
not necessarily wanting to leave the school?
Yeah. Wow. That question right there is the question that schools really need to ask.
Mhm.
And my answer to that question is the same.
Yeah.
And that the answer to that question is build healthy performance-based relationships before trouble comes.
Mhm.
You have to have healthy performance-based relationships, because when trouble comes, people have options. They start entertaining options. And by that time, you want to have a relationship that's healthy in place.
Mhm.
It's almost like if you're in a relationship with a spouse or a boyfriend or girlfriend, when problems come, you want there to be some health there so that you can manage that problem, because if not, then people are open to options.
Mhm.
So in the school world, when problems come, options become more appealing if
Mhm.
you don't have a healthy relationship.
Mhm.
If a parent or a family is going through an issue with their landlord or with their home and they have to move, if there's a fractured or weak relationship with the school, then where that family moves, they're not considering the school in their decision.
Mhm.
But if they have a healthy performance-based relationship with that school and their child, they know that, oh, this place is the place where my child needs to be.
Mhm.
They may still have to move, but now they're considering, man, I need to find somewhere in this area so we can keep Michael and Mary in that school.
Mhm.
And that's why relationships must be in place in those schools who had healthy performance-based relationships with their stakeholders, i.e. their families. When COVID hit, and that was a whole new world,
Mhm.
they were able to roll out untested solutions in a lot better way.
Yeah.
In a
Mhm.
lot better way. Parents were open to trying these, because nobody knew what we were going to do during COVID. We didn't know what
Mhm.
we were going to do. So you were basically trying things on the fly. And those people who had healthy relationships in place, they fared a little bit better than those who had fractured ones.
Mhm, mhm, mhm. Yeah, and I hope those lessons learned from the community engagement and involvement a lot of schools did during COVID
Yeah.
stuck. But I think as we cycle in and out kids, right? Because at high schools and middle schools, we got a whole bunch of new kids now that we didn't have when COVID hit, and elementary
Yeah.
schools, those kids are getting to the upper grades. So
Yeah.
it's not, a lot of time when we forge relationships with stakeholders, it's also filtering down to the siblings.
Yes, yes. They may not even be in the school, you know.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So I mentioned in your bio that you have this online parent training, powerengage.net. So tell me when it got started, what parents can get out of it. Is this a synchronous, asynchronous training? How does this
Yes.
help them?
So we had to start it. It was started prior to COVID, and we didn't know COVID was coming.
Mhm,
But what we understood, again, problem solution, problem solution. What we understood with our families is that they were not always in sync with us when we wanted to get information out to them.
mhm,
School schedules, work schedules, just a lot of different conflicts. And we weren't the only school who dealt with, we would have something after school and a fraction of our parent population would show.
mhm,
And they might want to be there, but either they couldn't because of work, what have you. So we wanted to come up with a solution. How do we get this very important information out to the bulk of our parents? So I remember sitting around with the staff and asking them a very basic question.
mhm,
And that was, if we had to teach all of our parents a list of things and we needed them to know these things in order to be better partners with us,
mhm,
what would those things be? And the staff came up with this long laundry list of things, important things, but there was a laundry list of things that parents could, that they needed to know and what they should do to be great partners. And then our second step was, we need to whittle this down. We can't, we can't have parents doing all this. So we've got the key things down to what I call meaningful minimums.
mhm, mhm,
7 meaningful minimums. If parents did these things, then they could be great partners with us. And it had nothing to do with socioeconomics. It had everything to do with will and skill.
mhm,
So we dwindled it down to 7, and those 7, what we call 7 power moves, are what we sent out to our parents, and they could
mhm,
do them on site in our parent conference center, where we would host trainings on all of those 7, or they could do them at their own pace in the comfort of their own home, or on their own phone, at work, while traveling, what have you. And our parent engagement shot through the roof,
mhm,
because now all of our parents were talking the same language because they had the same information. Now we had some parents who went over and above, but we had at least those meaningful minimums, as I call them.
mhm.
If you can do this, mom, dad, grandma, uncle, then we know that you are a partner. The last thing I will say to that, it's funny how we as educators tend to classify parents as, they don't really want to be involved. They if they were involved, they would be this. We kind of paint parent groups with wide brushes, and we did the same thing. But our parent training helped us have measurable data so we could make those kind of assessments about our
Mhm.
families.
Mhm. Mhm. And this is still available for parents to purchase is through your website then?
It isn't, but I will say that we've gotten such good traction from it that it's been updated. So it's not powerengage.net, it's
Okay,
powerparenting.com. Yeah,
okay,
powerparenting the letter u.com. So powerparenting the letter u.com.
okay. And is this like a set of modules? How many hours would they expect to spend doing this?
Yeah, so it is a set of modules. Um, it is asynchronous. It's synchronous when you're on site because we
Mhm.
have a facilitator there. If not, then you can do it asynchronous and just go at your own space,
Mhm.
on pace and space. So it's that way, and there are modules. And if you sat down and did all the modules together, one setting
Mhm.
with a big pizza, you could finish the whole course probably in about 3 hours.
Okay. Yeah,
Yeah,
so not a huge time investment, but
yeah,
like you said, it can be done with a facilitator or parents, on their phones, wherever they are. So
exactly.
yeah,
And
that sounds
when we're doing them on site, we stretch it out to about 7 weeks.
okay. Okay, so that's good to know. So once you transition from your principal position at the Male Leadership Academy, you've been working in full-time consulting. So just tell me a little bit about kind of uh, what your services look like in terms of schools that you tend to work with. Kind of what is the makeup of the school or some of the higher needs, and then is it something that you follow up with throughout the year or a several year period?
Sure. I've always, I shouldn't say always, but for the past 15 years I've been in consulting. They
Mhm.
pulled me out of consulting to operate
Okay.
the school. I enjoyed it. But then I went back into consulting, and in that role, I'm really helping schools with um, not only transforming school culture, but the one strategy that I uniquely use is increasing engagement.
Mhm.
So it's always about transforming school culture, but the main strategy is how do you get teachers and students at a greater level of engagement through
Mhm.
relationships? How do you get parents and families to have a greater level of engagement through relationships? And then how do you get the community more engaged um, through relationships? So those are the strategies. Lastly, what I do is all three of those strategies, I tie that in working with leadership, whether it be school-based leadership or whether at the superintendent level.
Mhm.
And in terms of the type of schools, it's across the board. Engagement is an issue for us all
Yeah.
at every level. The only type of schools who are not struggling with engagement are those schools who have a high percentage of students who are just they're on autopilot for performance. I mean, you don't
Mhm.
have to tell it. Just all you have to do is put a book in front of them.
Yeah.
They are locked and loaded. I mean,
Uh-huh.
they are intrinsically motivated, and they don't need you to give them a carrot. They don't need you to give them a stick. They know what they know what they know what they're going to do with their
Mhm.
life. And if you got a high percentage of those, then engagement is not your issue. But if you don't, as educators in this day and age, with kids being distracted by everything,
Mhm.
you've got to find a way to engage students.
Mhm. 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 So in a pre-chat, we talked a little bit about what you call as a next tsunami. So we're talking about the young male students, getting
Yeah.
them more engaged. So I work with middle school students, primarily sixth and seventh grade boys. You've worked with all age groups, but you kind of you know what I'm talking about when I talk
Yeah,
about those middle
yeah,
school boys in particular. And like, I
yeah,
know of a group of girls that'll do their work and the boys are just like
yeah,
all kids are distracted by stuff, but like
right.
in terms of honing in more academically, it's more difficult for that boys, especially in that maybe 10 to 14-year-old age range.
Yeah, yeah. And it's that way for a couple of reasons. The
Hmm.
first reason is from in elementary, particularly in the lower L's, kids are, right now they're going through their compliance stages.
Sure.
By and large, they're just compliant. By the time they get to middle school, now they can think a little bit on their own
Yeah.
and they can start placing a few more demands. So with that being the case, it's a interesting time in a young man's life because he's now questioning a little bit more, questioning authority a little bit more.
Hmm.
And simultaneously, we haven't changed our school cultures enough um, to embrace the way young men think and respond to learning. So
Hmm.
it's a lot of sitting, it's a lot of talking, and if you're not a teacher who can be very engaging, be very interactive, um, can teach to both genders' brains, and I'm talking about in general. When you study the brain-based sciences, you understand that, and you learn through MRIs and CAT scans that, by and large, the female brain can operate on both hemispheres. The
Hmm.
male brain operates pretty much on one.
Hmm.
we we are focused on one thing at a time. And because of that, we need more stimuli. Boys
Hmm.
need more stimuli. They need things coming at them. And
Hmm.
that's why they play video games. School, by and large, is not set up that way. They're unique teachers who will keep you moving and keep you hopping and keep you moving. Elementary is that way. If you remember, we were always playing games and singing and dancing and
Yeah.
counting and moving around. When we get to middle school, they're testing your self-discipline. It's more sitting, it's more structure. But unfortunately, boys need more of what they got in elementary.
Sure.
Um, there's a strategy that I teach when I'm working with teachers called it's called the MAC attack, MAC,
Hmm.
and I developed this while at the Mel Academy. When my teachers came to me and they were bringing their lesson plans, I got to the point where my director of instruction, you look at the content. I want to look through here and see if there's movement, activity,
Hmm.
and competition. I want to see if there's any of that in their lesson plan. And as we begin to add more and more movement, activity, and competition, oh my goodness. It's a lot noisier.
Hmm.
it's, it's not quiet, as quiet as some folk might like it, but adding movement to your lesson plan is healthy for everybody. Adding activity to your lesson plan is healthy for everybody. And adding competition. And those teachers who are listening, those adults who are listening, yes, I said competition. Competition is healthy. Our kids need to learn to compete
Hmm.
in a healthy, safe environment. So when we added movement, activity, and competition, that was a game changer for us.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, no, that's it's a no-brainer, like you said. Incorporating more outdoor activities, right?
Yeah,
Incorporating hands-on type things.
yeah,
And one thing I've experienced a lot is for different subjects, districts are going back to using curricula, right? Because we
yeah,
have such a teacher shortage, we have long-term
right,
subs,
right.
and a lot of these curricula are a lot of sit and get for the kids.
Yeah,
Either they're listening, if they're doing a language arts curriculum, they're listening to stories and then they're doing response, right?
yeah,
Or they're, writing notes or different things where it's a lot of sit and get. It's not the
mhm,
hands-on type stuff that they
yeah,
need, like you said.
yeah, yeah,
And I think the, curriculum planners, the instructional leadership teams in schools, if they can think more outside the box, well, they might be tied to a curriculum, but how can we maybe once a week
right,
incorporate activities in our classrooms where
right, Right.
It is the
Yeah.
games, it's the getting kids active,
Right.
those types of things. So
Yeah.
yeah,
And I understand, just as you very well
yeah,
explained it, I understand why it's tough to do it. Because for a teacher to implement a MAC routine, as I just described, and as you just described, in order to implement an activity, a routine or a curriculum that allows kids to have freedom, that teacher has got to be a well experienced
yeah,
either parent or teacher, someone who can handle 15 kids moving, 20 kids moving, and allowing them to stand. If you would have walked into my building, a lot of people or evaluators and school visitors were a little thrown off because you could walk in the front door and see boys in the hallway just sitting there doing homework
yeah.
or doing work all throughout the building, just sitting in the hallway. And you would see them on cushions. You would see them. Now they would have to earn that opportunity to do so.
Mhm.
But seeing that would throw you off, or you'd go in a classroom and they would be sitting on top of the desk and not in the desk, and or just standing up all together, just allowing kids to do that. And so that was always a question when people came into our building, and we had to share with them the validity of doing so. But to your point, it's tough to do that if you're short staffed. It's tough to do that if you've got teachers who might be seasoned, but they don't really know the kids because they're subbing that day.
Yeah, yeah,
It's tough to do that, but when you have seasoned teachers who have relationship with kids, it works well.
yeah, yeah. I wanted to move on and talk a little bit about a leadership course that you started developing when you left the Male Leadership Academy. It's called Future Man Success Prep.
Yes. One of my crown jewels for me, I just it is a curriculum that asks 7 Socratic questions
Mhm,
to young men, and their answers to those questions become what we call their personal power moves.
mhm,
And so we don't tell them the answers. We help them find the answers, which are personalized. And then that becomes your power move for that question. So, for instance, the first question is, Rodney, Marcus, Tony, Anthony, what type of man do you want to be? I'm not telling him, the teacher's not telling him, his mother's not telling him. We're asking him from a character and career standpoint, what type of man do you want to be? Do you
mhm,
want to be an honest man? Do you want to be someone who serves the community? Do you want to be someone who's responsible, reliable? What type of man do you want to be? And as they answer those questions, they begin to create a profile of the type of man that they want to be in the future.
mhm,
And it helps them by the time they get to the 7th question, they have a greater sense of who they look like 15 years from now.
mhm,
And it's not us dictating to them who you're going to be. It's us helping them walk through. Now, I will say this, Dana, and that is, we help them understand that this is a moving target.
mhm, mhm,
It's what you feel like in the 6th grade or the 7th grade or the 8th grade, because that's primarily who we work with as middle school boys. This might change later on down the road,
mhm,
but we want to give you a system for changing if you so desire. If you decided right now you wanted to be this type of man and you want to change later on, then you just go through the system again, and here's your framework for doing so.
mhm, mhm. Yeah, yeah. And like you said, it's more tier two type skills for behavior, life skills,
Yeah.
and um, a little bit about like if we have kids that we're losing due to high rates of behavior incidents like out school suspension, expulsion.
Yeah.
This is definitely something that would address some of those tier two behaviors.
Yeah, and much to my surprise, and this is just innovative teachers
Yeah.
using the tools that they have, we have teachers now using it at tier 1. So
Mhm.
kids who might be on the bubble, they're saying, hold on, I don't want to wait till I move you to tier 2.
Sure.
And at tier 2, with if a behavioral specialist or a dean uh, or a mentor is using our system to help a young man think through organizational skills, help a young man think through behavioral issues.
Mhm.
That's how the system works. But at tier 1, when we're talking about universal instruction, a teacher might say, hey Mario, I kind of see that the only problem you're having in my class is you don't organize yourself well enough at home, so when you get to school, you're already behind because you didn't spend your time at home organizing yourself.
Mhm.
So our training on organization, which boys uniquely suffer from more than girls,
Mhm.
their organizational skills, that helps them out there. So a young man can go through our personal organizational curriculum and just begin to see how preparing yourself at night can change your world tomorrow.
Mhm. Yeah, it's really just those executive functions as well, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah,
being
yeah,
prepared,
yeah. That's it. Just being ready. My dad used to always say when I was a kid, if you're on time, you're late. That was his, and it took me a while to understand, like, what do you mean if I'm on time, I'm late? I'm on time. And
Yeah,
what he was saying is you have to be there earlier, you have to be prepared earlier. But boys struggle with organizational skills a little bit more than girls do. So they'll do homework and forget it.
yeah.
I don't know if any of your boys are like that at your school, but boys will do the homework and forget it at home, or do the homework and leave it in their locker, and get dinged for it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, we've had a great conversation today around your work at the Male Leadership Academy and some of the things that you are implementing with parents as well as community. Out of everything we've talked about, what's one thing you'd like listeners to remember?
Um, there's one of the golden nuggets that I uncovered while um, writing the book Power Engage, and I got to get you a copy if you don't have one. But while researching for the book and writing the book Power Engage, one of the golden nuggets that came out is we did a meta analysis just on high performing schools, and one of the things that was clear, 20 years of research, and I need everybody to get this who might hear my voice. 20 years of research. There were no schools that we found that were high performing but had low relationships with their
Mhm.
students.
Yeah.
High performance is in line. If you want to say chicken or egg, high
Yeah.
performance and relationships, I don't know if you want to play that game, but just know you can't get high performance in a low relationship culture.
Hmm.
There has to be a high performance based relationship, teacher student relationship, in order to get high performance.
Hmm.
You'll get a few kids who are going to high perform. I don't care what you do. Um, but by and large, if you truly want to transform your culture, read John Hattie's work and then ask yourself, can you achieve any of those effect sizes that John Hattie talks about without having high, good, healthy relationships with students? And you'll
Hmm.
find out that it's rare.
Hmm.
so, so if there's anything I wanted them to know, just understand that high performance is birthed out of high, healthy relationships.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. And I think, yeah, both pointing people to your book Power Engage and any of Hattie's work that talks about researching how to engage our students and get them
Yeah.
more motivated. Places for listeners to go. Well, where can people connect with you find you online? I know you listed the powerparentingyou.com. What are some other websites where they can find your resources?
Sure. The easiest place is to go to imageofsuccess.com or just go to carlosjohnson.org. Either one of those places, image, IMAGE, of success.com or carlosjohnson.org. And there you'll find everything about me but my blood type.
Great. Well,
Yeah, but certainly I hope that the engagement piece is what our colleagues will go after, building healthy relationships.
well, it's been a pleasure having you on the Out of the Trenches podcast today. Your services are definitely something that a lot of schools need to look into and think about, engaging students for retention, but also the community as well. Thank you so much for being my guest.
Thank you for having me here, and you have a good and blessed day.